You know what the problem with humans is? They're absolutely terrible at dying quietly. I should have realized this when Ambassador Marcus Vale walked into the Grand Council chambers 3 cycles ago, wearing that insufferable smile that every human diplomat seemed to practice in front of mirrors. The kind of smile that said, "I know something you don't, and you're going to hate it." My name is Crix 9, third arbiter of the Galactic Federation Council, and I've been dealing with species politics for over 200 standard years. In all that time, I've learned one universal truth. When someone looks that confident walking into a room full of people who want them dead, they either have a death wish or a very, very good plan. Marcus Vale, as it turned out, had both. "Honored Council," he began, his voice carrying that peculiar human quality that made it sound like he was sharing a private joke. "I come bearing news from the Human Colonial Alliance. We've decided to respectfully decline your generous offer of subjugation." The silence that followed was so complete you could have heard a Zephyrian whisker drop, which, by the way, is practically impossible since Zephyrians don't actually have whiskers. It's just an expression we use when describing awkward silences that make everyone's exoskeleton itch. High Regent Voss 12, our esteemed leader who looked like someone had crossed a praying mantis with a bureaucrat, and then given the result anger management issues, slowly rose from his crystalline throne. His compound eyes glittered with what I can only describe as murderous amusement. "Decline?" Voss 12's voice resonated through his vocal sacs with all the warmth of a neutron star. "Ambassador Vale, perhaps your translation matrix is malfunctioning. We didn't make an offer. We issued a directive." Marcus adjusted his tie. A tie? Who wears decorative fabric around their neck to a diplomatic meeting? Humans, apparently. The man was either supremely confident or completely insane. "Oh, the translation was perfect," Marcus replied, still wearing that smile. "We just find your directive. How do humans put it? Adorable. Now, I've witnessed political disasters before. I was there when the Centauri Prime Minister accidentally declared war on his own moon. I watched the infamous incident of the poisoned peace treaty that wiped out half the Rigel Senate. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what happened next. High Regent Voss 12 didn't just lose his composure. He shattered it, ground it up, and sprinkled the pieces across 3 star systems. "Adorable," he shrieked, his mandibles clicking so rapidly they sounded like machine gun fire. "Your pathetic little species controls 12 systems. 12! We command over 40,000 worlds. We have fleets that could turn your home planet into cosmic dust." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. 40,000 worlds, you say? That's impressive. Really, truly impressive. He paused, pulling out a small data pad. Though I have to ask, how many of those worlds actually want to be part of your federation? The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. When a human starts asking seemingly innocent questions, smart beings start planning their evacuation routes. "That is irrelevant," Voss 12 hissed. "Is it, though?" Marcus continued, consulting his datapad with the casual interest of someone reading the weather report. "Because according to our intelligence, you're currently dealing with active rebellions on, let's see, 3,472 worlds. That's roughly 8% of your empire actively trying to kill you. In statistical terms, that's what we humans call a management problem." The other council members began shifting uncomfortably. Nobody talked about the rebellions. It was an unspoken rule, like not mentioning that High Regent Voss 12's mandibles made weird whistling sounds when he got excited. Furthermore, Marcus went on, apparently just getting warmed up, your military is spread so thin that you're using cargo haulers converted with jury-rigged weapons to patrol border systems. Your economy is held together with the galactic equivalent of duct tape and wishful thinking. And don't get me started on your supply lines. He looked up from his datapad with that same insufferable smile. So, here's our counterproposal. Instead of us joining your slowly collapsing empire, why don't you surrender to us? We promise to be gentle conquerors. The collective intake of breath from 47 different species sounded like a small hurricane. Even I had to admit, the human had titanium-plated nerve. That's when High Regent Voss 12 made the decision that would haunt the galaxy for generations to come. Guards, he said quietly, his voice carrying the kind of calm that precedes planetary genocide, kill him. Now, here's where things get interesting. See, the Galactic Federation had very specific rules about diplomatic immunity. Very, very specific rules that had been written in the blood of 3 different wars and signed by every member species. These rules stated, in language so clear that even a Thurian poet couldn't misinterpret it, that harming a diplomat was tantamount to declaring war on their entire species. But High Regent Voss 12 was having what humans might call a moment. The palace guards, 12-foot-tall Kragner warriors who looked like someone had given a rhinoceros opposable thumbs and a really bad attitude, moved toward Marcus with the efficiency of professional killers. Marcus, to his credit, didn't run. He didn't plead. He didn't even look particularly surprised. He just stood there, adjusted his tie one more time, and said something that still gives me nightmares. You know, he said conversationally, my daughter is going to be really upset about this. Then the plasma bolt took him in the chest, and Ambassador Marcus Vale, diplomatic envoy of the EBE, Human Colonial Alliance, died standing up with that damned smile still on his face. The silence that followed was different from the first one. This wasn't awkward political tension. This was the kind of silence that happens right before reality comes crashing down on everyone's heads, like an asteroid made of pure regret. I was the first to speak, mainly because someone had to, and apparently everyone else had suddenly developed an intense fascination with their footwear. High Regent, I said carefully, you do realize what you've just done? Voss 12 waved a dismissive appendage. I've eliminated a nuisance. The humans will file a formal protest, demand reparations, and eventually accept our terms. It's standard procedure. Standard procedure, I repeated slowly, doesn't usually involve vaporizing diplomats. Details, he replied, settling back into his throne with the satisfaction of someone who had just solved a particularly annoying puzzle. Besides, what are 12 systems going to do against our mighty Federation? I wanted to point out that our mighty Federation was currently held together with bureaucratic paperwork and the collective delusion that rebellions on 3,000 worlds was perfectly normal. But Voss 12 wasn't in a listening mood, and contradicting him immediately after he'd murdered someone seemed like poor timing. Instead, I did what any sensible third arbiter would do in such circumstances. I started quietly updating my resume and began researching real estate in the Outer Rim territories. 3 days later, we received the first transmission from Earth. It wasn't from the Human Colonial Alliance government. It wasn't from their military command. It wasn't even from their diplomatic corps, which would have been proper protocol. It was from a young woman with her father's eyes and a voice that could have frozen liquid helium. My name is Elena Vale, she said, standing in what appeared to be the command center of a human dreadnought. Behind her, through massive viewport windows, I could see the distinctive silhouettes of what looked like half the human fleet. "You killed my father." She paused, and in that pause, I swear I could hear the collective nervous gulp of every council member watching the transmission. That was a mistake. The transmission cut out, leaving us staring at a blank screen and wondering if it was too late to claim we'd been temporarily possessed by cosmic radiation when we'd voted to support Voss 12's decision. "One ship," High Regent Voss 12 announced to the emergency council session, convened 6 hours later. "They sent one ship to threaten us. Are we supposed to be intimidated by this display of human melodrama?" I cleared my throat. A sound that, in my species, indicates either polite disagreement or impending digestive distress. In this case, it was definitely the former. "High Regent," I said carefully, "our intelligence reports indicate that what's heading toward the E3D capital system isn't exactly one ship." "Explain." I activated the holographic display, showing the sensor readings our deep space monitors had picked up. The three-dimensional image that materialized above the council table looked like someone had decided to redecorate the local space-time continuum with warships. "It's a fleet," I continued. "A rather large fleet. Current count shows approximately 200 vessels, ranging from destroyers to what appear to be experimental dreadnoughts we've never seen before." The murmuring from the council members sounded like a swarm of agitated insects, which, considering that 30% of our membership was actually insectoid, wasn't entirely metaphorical. 200 ships, Voss 12 mused, against our home defense fleet of 800. Still favorable odds. "Yes, well," I said, consulting my datapad with the enthusiasm of someone delivering news about a plague outbreak. "There's more. It seems the humans have been busy over the past few years. They've developed something they're calling Project Prometheus. Which is, we're not entirely sure. Our intelligence suggests it involves some form of weapons technology that makes conventional plasma artillery look like children's toys." High Regent Voss 12's mandibles clicked once, slowly. In Zephyrian body language, this was equivalent to a human saying, "Oh, frack." "Furthermore," I continued, "because apparently I enjoy being the bearer of apocalyptic news, they've received support pledges from 17 of our member systems." "What?" The screech that came from Voss 12's vocal sacs was so high-pitched that it shattered 3 of the ceremonial crystal formations decorating the chamber walls. Several council members covered their auditory organs and looked at me with expressions that clearly said, "Why did you have to tell him that?" "It seems," I said, raising my voice to be heard over the continued screeching, "that Marcus Vale's little speech about rebellions and management problems resonated with certain planetary governments. They've declared their intention to, how did they phrase it? Support the righteous cause of justice against tyrannical oppression." 17 systems, Voss 12 repeated, his voice now barely above a whisper. 17 systems have betrayed us. "Actually," Councillor Thane Prime interjected from across the chamber, "it's 19 now. 2 more declared independence while you were screeching. If looks could kill, Thane Prime would have been nothing but a small pile of organic carbon by this point. As it was, he just shrunk deeper into his seat and tried to become invisible." "How long?" Voss 12 asked, with the kind of deadly calm that suggests someone is calculating exactly how many people they can murder before lunch. "Until the human fleet reaches our system?" I checked my chronometer. "Approximately 14 standard hours, assuming they maintain current velocity." 14 hours. He stood, up, his exoskeleton reflecting the chamber's lights like some kind of nightmarish disco ball. 14 hours to prepare for war with a species that just lost their diplomat and gained what appears to be a very motivated admiral. About that, I said, because apparently I have a death wish. Admiral Elena Vale isn't just motivated. According to our files, she graduated top of her class from the Human Strategic Command Academy, served with distinction in 3 separate colonial conflicts, and is reportedly something of a tactical genius. I paused, consulting my notes. Her service record also indicates a particular talent for what humans call creative problem-solving. She once ended a 6-month siege by convincing the enemy that their own supply depot was haunted. Haunted? Voss 12's compound eyes swiveled toward me with the kind of focus usually reserved for particularly interesting prey. Apparently, she infiltrated their base, rearranged their equipment in impossible configurations, and left holographic recordings of strange sounds and voices throughout their facilities. The enemy forces abandoned their positions within 3 days, convinced that the site was cursed by angry spirits. The chamber fell silent, except for the soft humming of the environmental systems and the occasional nervous click from various exoskeletons. She made them think a supply depot was haunted, Counselor Thane Prime said slowly. And they just left? Humans, I replied, have a particular talent for psychological warfare. High Regent Voss 12 settled back into his throne, his mandibles now clicking in the slow, rhythmic pattern that indicated deep thought or impending mental breakdown. Very well, he said finally. If Admiral Elena Vale wants a war, she'll have one. Activate all defense platforms, recall the 3rd and 7th Fleets from the Outer Rim, and send word to our allies. Sir, I said, consulting my datapad again, about our allies. Yes? Most of them appear to be, how should I put this delicately, suddenly very busy with urgent domestic matters and unable to provide military assistance at this time? All of them? All of them. Voss 12's exoskeleton made a sound like grinding metal. So we face the humans alone. Well, I said, trying to inject some optimism into the situation, not entirely alone. The Mordak sovereignty has offered to sell us additional plasma torpedoes at only triple the usual price. How generous of them! They also mentioned something about a bulk discount if we purchase more than 50,000 units. 50,000, Voss 12 repeated. Do we even have 50,000 torpedo tubes in the entire home fleet? I did some quick calculations. No, sir. We have approximately 800. Then what exactly would we do with 49,200 extra torpedoes? I suppose we could throw them really hard. The look Voss 12 gave me suggested that my career as third arbiter might be coming to an abrupt end, possibly along with my existence as a living organism. That was a joke, sir, I clarified quickly. A very poor joke, but a joke nonetheless. This entire situation is a joke, he replied, a cosmic joke with us as the punchline. And you know what? He was absolutely right. Because 12 hours later, when the human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of our system, we discovered that Admiral Elena Vale had brought more than just ships. She had brought something that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. But that's a story for another time, because right now, sitting in my emergency bunker 70 kilometers underground, watching the preliminary engagement reports scroll across my screen like a list of everything that could possibly go wrong, I'm starting to think that maybe the humans had the right idea about their ambassador's final words. His daughter was indeed going to be upset about his death. And when humans get upset, apparently, they don't just file diplomatic protests, they bring fire. The first thing you need to understand about humans is that they don't fight fair. Not even a little bit. While we were frantically positioning our 800 ships into what our tactical computers assured us was an optimal defensive formation, Admiral Elena Vale was busy proving that human military doctrine apparently consisted of one simple principle. If it's not cheating, you're not trying hard enough. Incoming transmission from the human fleet, Communications Officer Zara 8 announced, her voice carrying that particular tremor that indicated either technical difficulties or existential terror. Given our current situation, I was betting on the latter. "Put it through," High Regent Voss 12 ordered, straightening his exoskeleton with the kind of regal dignity that suggested he hadn't spent the last 6 hours stress-molting in his private chambers. The main screen flickered to life, revealing Admiral Elena Vale standing on what appeared to be the bridge of a ship that looked like someone had decided to crossbreed a dreadnought with a nightmare. Behind her, the soft glow of instrument panels cast shadows that made her look less like a grieving daughter and more like the avatar of cosmic vengeance. "High Regent Voss 12, she said, her voice carrying the kind of calm that made smart people start writing their final messages to loved ones. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." "Admiral Vale," Voss 12 replied, attempting to project the authority of someone who commanded 40,000 worlds and definitely wasn't currently hiding in a reinforced bunker. "If you're referring to your father's body, I'm afraid it was disposed of, according to standard sanitization protocols." "Wrong answer." "So very, very wrong." Elena's smile was the kind of expression that made Absolute Zero look warm and inviting. "Actually, I was referring to justice. But thank you for clarifying your complete lack of respect for diplomatic protocols, interstellar law, and basic decency." She took a step closer to the camera, and I swear the temperature in our command center dropped several degrees. "You see, Regent, when you murdered my father, you made a fundamental miscalculation. You assumed that because humans control only 12 systems, we're somehow less capable than your sprawling federation of reluctant subjects and forced compliance. Your numerical disadvantage remains unchanged," Voss 12 stated, though his mandibles were clicking in what I recognized as barely controlled anxiety. 200 ships against 800 is still mathematics." "Mathematics," Elena repeated, chuckling in a way that suggested she found the concept adorable. "You're absolutely right. Let me share some mathematics with you." The screen split, showing Elena on one side and what appeared to be a tactical display on the other. The display showed our system, with our fleet positions marked in green and the human fleet marked in red. "Your 800 ships," Elena continued, "are positioned in a standard defensive sphere around your capital world. Classic formation, very traditional, very predictable." Red arrows began appearing on the tactical display, showing projected attack vectors and fleet movements. "However, you've made 3 critical assumptions. First, you assumed that all 200 of our ships are warships. Second, you assumed that we're planning a conventional assault. And third, you assumed that we're alone." That last word hung in space like a toxic cloud, and I felt my exoskeleton begin producing stress hormones in quantities that would have impressed a chemical plant. "What do you mean, alone?" Voss 12 demanded. Elena's smile widened. "Tell me, Regent, how many of your member worlds have you checked on lately?" Before anyone could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the command center. Status boards lit up like festival decorations, displaying alerts from across our territory in a rainbow of warning colors that suggested our day was about to get significantly worse. "Sir," Navigation Officer Tex Prime called out, his voice cracking with what sounded like impending panic, "we're receiving emergency transmissions from everywhere." "Clarify everywhere," Voss 12 ordered, though his tone suggested he really didn't want clarification. Rebellion uprisings on 237 worlds, sir. Coordinated strikes against government facilities, spaceports, and communication networks. They're all happening simultaneously. The tactical display updated, showing our territory dotted with red warning indicators like some kind of cosmic disease spreading across the galaxy. It was beautiful in a terrifying, apocalyptic sort of way. "Impossible," Voss 12 whispered. "How could they coordinate something like this?" "Oh, that's the easy part," Elena replied cheerfully. "Turns out, when you spend years oppressing people, they get really motivated to work together against you." "Who knew?" She gestured to something off-screen, and the tactical display zoomed in on specific sectors. The Altair colony provided intelligence networks. The Vega Mining Consortium supplied weapons and equipment. The Centauri Trade Federation handled logistics and supply routes, and the Outer Rim territories offered safe havens for coordination meetings. Each name she mentioned appeared on the display, connected by lines that formed an intricate web of cooperation spanning half the galaxy. "You see, Regent, while you were busy counting ships and calculating odds, we were busy talking to your subjects. Turns out, most of them aren't particularly happy about being subjects." "This is madness," Voss 12 sputtered. "You've started a galactic civil war." "No," Elena corrected, her voice becoming deadly serious. "You started a galactic civil war the moment you decided that 40,000 worlds should bow to your authority. We just gave everyone else the opportunity to finish it." More alarms began sounding, and I realized that our optimal defensive formation was rapidly becoming less optimal by the minute. When your rear guard is suddenly dealing with rebellions on their home worlds, maintaining formation becomes what military strategists call impossible. "Admiral," I interjected, because someone had to ask the obvious question, "What exactly are your terms?" Elena looked at me with what might have been approval, or possibly the expression predators give prey that shows promising survival instincts. "Terms are simple. Third Arbiter Crix 9. Complete dissolution of the Galactic Federation. Release of all subjugated worlds. Establishment of a new Galactic Council with actual representation rather than forced compliance. And Voss 12 stands trial for war crimes, starting with the murder of my father." "Never," Voss 12 hissed. "I am High Regent of the Galactic Federation. I bow to no one." "Then I suppose we do this the hard way," Elena replied with a shrug. "Shame, really. I was hoping to avoid unnecessary casualties." That's when she revealed the thing that still gives me nightmares. "By the way, Regent, remember those experimental dreadnoughts your intelligence mentioned? The ones with Project Prometheus technology?" "What about them?" "Well, it turns out Project Prometheus wasn't a weapons system." Elena's smile returned, and this time it was genuinely terrifying. It was a delivery system. The tactical display updated again, showing the human fleet in much greater detail. What we had assumed were 200 warships resolved into something far more disturbing. 50 actual combat vessels, 50 support ships, and 100 vessels that appeared to be modified cargo haulers. "You brought merchant ships to a military engagement?" Voss 12 asked, sounding genuinely confused. "Not merchant ships," Elena corrected. "Deployment platforms." Then space around our defensive fleet began filling with things that shouldn't exist. Small objects, thousands of them, deployed from the cargo vessels like seeds scattered by cosmic wind. At first, they looked harmless. Tiny metallic spheres no bigger than fighter craft, drifting seemingly aimlessly through space. "What are those?" Communications, Officer Zara 8 whispered. Autonomous defense drones, Elena announced proudly. Each one equipped with artificial intelligence, adaptive targeting systems, and enough firepower to cripple a frigate. We call them Wasps. How many? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. 50,000, give or take. The silence that followed was so complete that you could have heard a quantum particle decay. Even our environmental systems seemed to hold their breath. 50,000, Voss 12 repeated slowly. You brought 50,000 automated weapons into our system. Actually, that's just the first wave. We have another 100,000 in reserve, but I thought we'd start small. No sense in being excessive. That's when I realized that humans don't just have a talent for psychological warfare. They have a talent for making their enemies question fundamental assumptions about reality itself. Our fleet of 800 ships was suddenly facing an enemy that wasn't playing by conventional rules. Instead of ship-to-ship combat, we were dealing with swarm tactics. Instead of predictable battle formations, we were facing thousands of independently operating weapons that could adapt to our strategies faster than we could develop them. Fire on the drones, Voss 12 ordered. Sir, Weapons Coordinator Vex 11 reported. Targeting systems are having difficulty acquiring locks. The drones are employing some form of adaptive camouflage and erratic movement patterns. Then fire everything. Blanket the entire area. What followed was the most expensive fireworks display in galactic history. Our fleet opened fire with every weapon system we possessed, turning local space into a light show that was visible from 3 star systems away. Plasma bolts, missile volleys, and energy beams created a deadly aurora that should have vaporized anything within a 1,000-kilometer radius. When the weapons fire died down and the energy dissipated, we discovered that we had successfully destroyed approximately 24 drones. The other 49,976 were still there, having apparently used our own weapons fire as cover to move into optimal attack positions. Well, Elena's voice came through the communications channel. That was entertaining. Are you finished? How? Voss 12 demanded. How did they survive a full fleet bombardment? Adaptive shielding, energy redistribution, and really good artificial intelligence, Elena replied helpfully. Also, we may have borrowed some of your own defensive technologies. You'd be amazed what people will share when they're motivated by centuries of oppression. The Wasps began their attack run. I've witnessed a lot of military disasters in my time, but nothing quite like watching a supposedly invincible fleet being systematically dismantled by weapons the size of shuttlecraft. The drones moved like a living thing, flowing around our defensive fire, adapting to our tactics in real time and striking with surgical precision at critical systems. They didn't try to destroy our ships outright. That would have been wasteful. Instead, they targeted engines, weapons arrays, communication systems, and life support. Within minutes, our mighty defensive fleet was reduced to 800 floating pieces of expensive scrap metal filled with very confused and increasingly panicked crew members. Status report, Voss 12 demanded, though his voice had lost most of its earlier authority. Engines offline across the fleet, weapons systems disabled, communications limited to short-range emergency channels, life support functioning but compromised, Tactical Officer Nix 4 reported with the enthusiasm of someone reading obituaries. Casualties. Surprisingly minimal, sir. The drones seem to be avoiding targeting crew compartments or life support systems directly. That was when Elena's voice came through the emergency channel, and she sounded almost apologetic. Sorry about the inconvenience, everyone. We're not actually trying to kill you. We just needed to make sure you weren't in a position to interfere with the rest of our operation." "What operation?" I asked, though I had a sinking suspicion I already knew. "The liberation of your capital world, of course. Can't have a proper revolution without liberating the capital." Through the command center's main viewport, we watched as human landing craft began deploying from their support vessels. Not dozens of craft, not hundreds, but thousands. The sky filled with transport ships carrying what appeared to be enough ground forces to occupy a small moon. "How many troops?" Voss 12 whispered. "According to our sensors," Tactical Officer Nix 4 reported, "approximately 200,000 soldiers, plus support personnel, plus what appears to be prefabricated command centers, communication arrays, and are those construction vehicles?" "They're planning to stay," I realized. "This isn't just an invasion. It's a complete occupation and reconstruction." Elena's face appeared on the screen again, and this time she looked like someone who had just successfully completed a very complex home improvement project. "Citizens of the Galactic Federation," she announced, and I realized this transmission was being broadcast across the entire galaxy. "Today marks the end of an era, the era of forced compliance, taxation without representation, and rule by fear." Behind her, through the bridge windows, we could see the lights of our capital city. Except they weren't the harsh, utilitarian lights of Federation architecture. They were warmer, more inviting. The humans had somehow managed to improve the lighting while conducting a planetary invasion. Effective immediately, the Galactic Federation is dissolved. All subjugated worlds are free to choose their own governments and destinies. The new Galactic Cooperative will be established based on voluntary membership, mutual benefit, and actual democratic representation. "You can't do this," Voss 12 protested weakly. "The Federation has stood for over 1,000 years. And in 1,000 years, how many species have you elevated? How many worlds have prospered under your rule? How many of your subjects would choose to remain if given a real choice?" The answer, judging by the continued reports of successful rebellions streaming in from across our territory, was apparently not many. Furthermore, Elena continued, former Federation officials who wish to participate in the new government will be welcome to apply, provided they can demonstrate a commitment to democratic principles and pass a basic competency examination. "A competency examination," Voss 12 sputtered. "I am High Regent. I don't take examinations." "Well," Elena replied with that same insufferable smile her father had worn, "I suppose that's your choice. The examination covers basic mathematics, interspecies diplomacy, economic theory, and anger management. It's really not that difficult." "Anger management? Given recent events, we thought it might be relevant." That's when the final piece of Elena's plan became clear. She hadn't just come for revenge. She hadn't just come to destroy the Federation. She had come to build something better in its place, and she had planned for everything, including what to do with the former government officials. Those who pass the examination will be eligible for positions in the new government. Those who don't can retire with full pensions to worlds of their choosing. Those who attempt to resist the transition will be prosecuted for war crimes. She paused, looking directly at Voss 12. "The choice is yours, former High Regent. Democracy or prosecution? Reform or retirement? What's it going to be?" 3 hours later, I found myself sitting in what used to be the High Regent's private office, across from a human bureaucrat who looked like she could organize a galactic government before lunch and still have time to file the paperwork properly. Third Arbiter Crix 9, she said, consulting a datapad with the efficiency of someone who had clearly done this before. Your service record shows competent administration, minimal corruption, and what appears to be a genuine attempt to maintain interspecies cooperation. Would you be interested in serving as Deputy Administrator for the Outer Rim territories? That's a significant position, I said, still trying to process how quickly everything had changed. Yes, well, competent administrators are surprisingly rare. We're hoping to fix that. What happened to Hau, Regent Voss 12? He chose prosecution. Apparently, he felt that taking a competency examination was beneath his dignity. She made a note on her datapad. He's currently in a very comfortable detention facility, awaiting trial for war crimes. The prosecution is being handled by a joint tribunal representing all affected species. And the Federation? Officially dissolved as of 2 hours ago. The Galactic Cooperative will be established once we've finished processing applications for membership. We expect about 38,000 worlds to apply. 38,000? That's almost all of them. Yes. Well, it turns out most species prefer voluntary cooperation to forced compliance. Who knew? I looked out the office window at the capital city below. Human construction crews were working alongside local workers, dismantling the massive statues and monuments to Federation power, and replacing them with parks and community centers. How did you plan all this? I asked. The coordination, the timing, the logistics, it's impossible. The human administrator smiled, and for the first time since this whole crisis began, I saw an expression that wasn't terrifying or apocalyptic. It was actually rather pleasant. Third Arbiter, my people have a saying. When someone kills your diplomat, you don't just demand justice. You make sure it never happens again. By conquering the galaxy? By liberating it. There's a difference. And you know what? She was right. Because 6 months later, as I sat in my new office on the Cooperative Council, reviewing applications for membership from species who had been oppressed for centuries, I realized that Elena Vale had done something unprecedented in galactic history. She had kept her promise. The galaxy was free, democratic, and actually functioning better than it had in a millennium. Trade was flourishing. Conflicts were being resolved through negotiation rather than force, and for the first time in my lifetime, the phrase galactic peace wasn't a punchline. Of course, there were still challenges. Former Federation hardliners occasionally caused trouble, requiring intervention from the Cooperative Defense Force. Pirates and raiders tested our resolve on a regular basis. And don't get me started on the paperwork involved in reorganizing 40,000 star systems. But every time I felt overwhelmed by the complexity of it all, I remembered Ambassador Marcus Vale's final words. My daughter is going to be really upset about this. He was right. She was upset. And when humans get upset, they don't just demand justice. They build it from scratch, whether you want them to or not. The moral of the story? Don't kill human diplomats. Not because they're particularly important, but because their daughters might just decide to reorganize your entire galaxy out of spite. And trust me, you don't want to be on the wrong side of human spite. It's surprisingly efficient.